Okay, so ready to dive into this frugal living deep dive?
Yeah, let's do it.
You've given us some really interesting stuff to work with here.
Lots to dig into.
I'm actually already kind of inspired by some of this stuff, like all these clever little ways people have come up with to like stretch a dollar.
Yeah, it's amazing what people do.
There was this one podcast episode. Well, they weren't even just talking about saving pennies. It was more like they were talking about transforming your whole relationship with money.
Yeah, and that's, I think, where that, like, real financial freedom comes in. It's not just about cutting back. It's about, like, spending on what actually matters to you.
Right. Exactly. And speaking of things that matter, I have to say their take on meal planning was kind of a game changer for me. I don't know about you, but I'm like the queen of takeout after a long day.
Oh, same here.
But they made a really good point about, how much money and food we waste when we don't plan ahead.
It's so true. And all those impulse buys at the grocery store, like, forget it. They get you every time.
Every time.
The thing about meal planning, I think, is that it's like a win-win for everybody. Like, you save money, obviously, but you also reduce waste, and then you don't have that, like, oh, what's for dinner, like, every single night. It's like that whole mental load is gone.
Yeah. You're not like staring into the fridge at like 7 p.m. wondering what to eat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
They even suggested like thinking of it as making your own like personalized convenience meals. So, cook in bulk on the weekend, portion it out, and bam, you've got like a freezer full of healthy homemade meals that are ready in minutes.
It's true. That's such a good idea.
It's genius.
It is. Total control of your time and your budget.
Yeah.
And speaking of taking control, they had some really interesting thoughts on DIY projects in this episode.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I know it's not a new concept, but they kind of went beyond the usual, like, it's cheaper to do it yourself argument.
Yeah, they did. They talked about the psychological, like, satisfaction of creating something yourself.
Yeah, like that sense of accomplishment.
It's true. There's this feeling you get, like, bucking the trend of instant gratification, which is so big these days,
That's
right?
huge. You're like, I made this. It's so satisfying.
Totally.
And it's about, I think, like, reclaiming agency in a world where we're just constantly being, like, sold things,
Right, right.
And when you put your time and effort into making something, you actually value it more.
Right.
You're less likely to, like, fall into that trap of impulse buys because you're like, I have this thing that I made and I love it.
That is so true. Like, I always think about handmade gifts. I cherish those so much more than something, that's mass-produced.
Yeah.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit, the source also had some bold advice about negotiation, which I don't know about you, but I get intimidated just thinking about it.
Oh, tell me about it. I think a lot of us do, right? Like, we're just so used to accepting the price we're given.
Totally.
But the truth is, a lot of companies, they actually have wiggle room built into their pricing. Like, they actually expect you to negotiate.
They actually said that. That blows my mind. I had no idea.
It's true. It's about, I think, understanding your own, like, worth as a customer.
Right.
You get this great example. Imagine you're paying for, like, internet service by just calling your provider, right? And, like, just asking for a better deal. You could potentially save, like, hundreds of dollars every year. And if they're not willing to budge, well, guess what? There are plenty of other providers out there who might be happy to have your business.
Right, exactly. Competition. It's funny, we're like scared to ask her what we want when it comes to money stuff. Like, I'll totally haggle over like a sweater at a flea market.
Right.
But when it comes to my internet bill, just like, okay, whatever you say.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Like, we just pay it.
Yeah.
I think it's like a psychological thing, right?
Totally.
But knowledge is power, right? So now that we know companies, like, expect you to negotiate,
Right.
you can kind of go in there with, like, a new sense of confidence.
For sure.
Like, hey, wait a minute, this is my money.
Exactly. And speaking of being resourceful, I love what the source said about borrowing and swapping. It reminded me of, like, when I was a kid, we used to borrow tools from our neighbors all the time. It just made sense.
Right. Why buy it if you can borrow it?
Exactly.
There's this, like, idea that we need to own everything.
Yes.
But in reality, a lot of these things just sit around unused, right?
Most of the time.
So borrowing or swapping, it's not only practical, but it's also a great way to, like, build community, right?
It is. I've been part of a clothing swap group for like a year now.
Oh, cool.
And it's amazing. I've gotten some really great clothes, decluttered my own wardrobe,
Nice.
and I've made some good friends through it too. It's great.
You see, frugal living, it's not about, like, deprivation. It's about creativity. It's about connection. It can even be fun. And speaking of fun, the source also talked about a trend that's, like, near and dear to my heart. Secondhand shopping.
Oh, yeah, baby. Thrifting. They were all about it. Thrift stores, yard sales, online marketplaces, like you name it. They're like, go explore it. And you know what? I have to agree. I have found some of my favorite furniture pieces, clothing items,
Really?
secondhand.
That's amazing.
I
It's like
know.
a treasure hunt. You never know what you're going to find.
It's so true.
And that thrill of finding something like really high quality, but for like a fraction of the price.
Yes.
It's unbeatable.
The
It's
best.
like a win-win for your wallet and for the environment.
Totally. Giving things a second life, it's so important for sustainability. And honestly, sometimes those like pre-loved items, they just have more character, more
Mhm.
charm than anything brand new.
I totally agree. They tell a story.
They do. They really do.
Okay. Are you ready for a slightly more radical idea from the podcast?
Hit me with it. I'm feeling brave.
They called it the, like, no spend challenge.
Oh, yeah, the no spend challenge. I remember this.
Mm.
I have to admit, that one sounded a little scary at first. Like, really, no spending for a whole day.
Or like a whole week.
I know, it sounds intense, but that's kind of the point, right?
Right.
Like, it's supposed to be this, like, reset button for your spending. It forces you to, like, really be aware of every single time you're like, ooh, I want to buy that. Like, every little thing.
Yeah, it's like you're so used to spending without even thinking about it.
Exactly. You're on autopilot.
Totally.
And then this, like, forces you to stop and be like, wait, do I actually need this? Or am I just buying it because I'm, like, bored or whatever?
I can see that.
Right. Like, it kind of exposes those, like, little treat yourself moments
Absolutely.
that, like, really add up over time without you even realizing.
Oh, for sure. A latte here, a magazine there.
Exactly. They actually told a story about this one person who tried the no spend challenge.
Oh, yeah.
And they realized they were spending, like, almost $100 a month on takeout coffee.
Oh, my gosh.
They had no idea. It wasn't until they, like, actually stopped and paid attention. Wow, that is eye-opening. See, this is why I love, like, doing these deep dives with you. It's not even just about being frugal. It's about, like, uncovering these hidden patterns
Right.
in our spending in our lives
Yes.
and figuring out what, like, actually matters to us, what
Yes.
aligns with our values. Like you were saying earlier, it's about, like, freedom, not deprivation.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's about, like, understanding that, like, real wealth, it's not about how much stuff you have.
Yeah.
Or how much you spent, right? It's about, like, what you experience.
Yeah.
And how much you can, like, enjoy your life without feeling, like, tied to material possession.
Yes, love that. All right, so for our listeners out there, anyone who is like totally feeling inspired right now to take control of their finances, to take control of their lives, what would you say is like the if you had to pick one, the most important takeaway from this whole deep dive?
That's a good question. I think the biggest thing is, like, remembering that frugal living, it's not about restriction. It's about empowerment, you know?
Like, it's about being mindful. It's about being resourceful. It's about being creative with your money. It's about, like, aligning your spending with your values, finding joy in, like, the simple things, right? And just remembering that, like, small changes can lead to big results over time.
Beautifully said. Small steps, big impact. So I'm curious, after exploring all these awesome, like, frugal living tips and tricks, is there one thing that you're, like, personally inspired to try? Or maybe something that you already do that you feel like, this is it? This is, like, my financial freedom move?
You know, I've been wanting to try a clothing swap forever.
Yes, do it.
I think I'm going to finally, like, bite the bullet, find a local group, and just go for it. What about you? What are you going to try?
I'm going to commit to a month of meal planning. No more last-minute takeout for this girl. I'm ready to take control of my budget and my evenings. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been, like, truly enlightening.
It's been fun.
It has.
Happy saving, everyone.